Hey, thanks for clicking on the video. Today we're continuing to look at some insane Warlock builds coming off of the massive balance patch that released earlier this month. And today's focuses on turning our most lethal passive damage into something that surpasses using actual weapons. Today, we're taking our Hellion, which normally deals around 200 damage, and turning it into an orb printing, annihilating, and substantial damage tool that hits numbers near triple its base. But before we begin, as usual, there is a dim link down below for your convenience. There are also timestamps down there too, so you can scrub through the video at your leisure. I also wanted to shout out my Discord server. I'm trying to grow it with you guys, the community, and I would really appreciate you guys joining that. Also, if you do enjoy what I make and you're one of the majority that watches my stuff but isn't subscribed yet, a subscription would be greatly appreciated. It helps me out a lot. Now with that said, digging straight into the build, the first thing we look at is the crux of this build, that being our Hellion aspect. This aspect is present on both of the prismatic and solar subclasses, and it performs the same on both. For today's video, we will be focusing on a prismatic version mostly. But all the data that I'm going to cover, being about Hellion damage, synergies, and modifiers, all of that applies to both subclasses. So, for example, if you're doing a raid and you need a Well of Radiance, then everything you learn here can be applied there. And I'll actually have two build links in the description, one for prismatic and one for solar. But most of the content in this game is more so about running around just killing ads with fewer bosses, so we focus on the more general version of this build, which is on prismatic. So with that said, this aspect reads, activate your class ability to summon a solar mortar that lobs flaming projectiles at distant targets. Targets damaged by the mortar are scorched. We can take a direct look at this and its effect in game. When we cast our Rift or Phoenix Dive, whatever our class ability is, we get our Hellion to spawn, and it will last 20 seconds. While active, our solar buddy will target enemies in front of us up to 40 meters, and will lob a single solar projectile that does 217 damage each time it hits. This projectile also adds 30 scorch, so that means it will ignite in just 4 shots, giving us this larger number. And out of curiosity, because we can look at it, the DPS that our little guy does in its base form is around about 300 damage per second. And moving on from the ability that we were basing this build on, we have the exotic that will be augmenting it. This exotic is none other than Eunoia, the newest Warlock exotic. This exotic reads, Hellion projectiles deal increased damage the further they travel, eventually fracturing into scorching shrapnel. Now, there's a good bit going on here, but the first thing we can see is that our Hellion has these 4 little lines coming off of it, so he gets an immediate drip upgrade. But other than that, when facing targets that let our Hellion fly for longer than 1 second, our Hellion will spawn 4 extra projectiles. These projectiles will track pretty aggressively and each deal 18 damage on impact. Simultaneously though, our Hellion's base projectile damage, so the main one, will be dealing more depending on how long it flies for. This scales linearly from 0% to plus 20% after being in air for 17 meters. That means, in optimal conditions, Eunoia will increase our Hellion damage from 217 to 332, adding everything up, or by 52%. Do note though, our damage is not really increased by that much if we aren't at least a good distance away from our targets. So if you're using this with a sword or shotgun, there won't be a massive damage increase from the exotic. The rest of the build though will still work. Now, continuing on from our exotic armor piece, this tends to be where I like to talk about exotic weapons. For this build though, as with my favorite kinds of builds, we don't have anything to talk about here. Our weapons can be adapted to whatever activity you are currently playing. With no requirements, this allows this build to excel in all types of content. So with that said, we'll move on to the next required thing, that being our subclass. Moving left to right, of course, we already said we were in prismatic, and for our super, we run Song of Flame. This is incredibly strong, giving you a very high damage output and survivability. It's probably my favorite super in the entire game. And then after that, we have our class ability, which is going to be Phoenix Dive. That way we can reapply Hellion on the shortest cooldown. The effects of Phoenix Dive are also pretty nice, that being an instant heal for us and our allies. And after class ability, we have our melee, and in usual prismatic fashion, we are an Arcane Needle. This melee does great damage on its own and comes with 3 charges intrinsically, making it very spammable. Then after our melee, we have our grenade, which can be a number of things. For me though, I run a Vortex Grenade, mainly for some fragment synergy, which we'll go over in a moment. Moving over though, we now have our aspects, and the first one we of course already know is Hellion. But to pair with this aspect, it comes to no surprise that we are using Feed Void. This aspect will grant us Devour when getting kills with any type of ability damage, which includes Hellion. In-game, we can see Devour activating on a Hellion kill, and then as Hellion gets more kills, we can see our grenade getting some chunk regen. And if we take any damage, we are getting a massive chunk of health back too on kills. Also, not to mention, every kill while Devour is active refreshes its time, making it stupid easy to keep up. Now moving away from aspects, we have our Fragments, and I quickly want to showcase a new synergy. This fragment, Facet of Mending, says grenade kills cure us. And if we look in game with no Devour, Hellion kills are healing us. Even if we swap over to Solar, there is a similar fragment and we can see it at work too. For Prismatic though, we don't need this fragment, but definitely do keep this synergy in mind if you can't use Devour, let's say in the future or with a build you wanted to try out. As for what our Prismatic build runs, the first one is Facet of Hope. This fragment will massively reduce our class ability cooldown while we have any kind of buff active, and Devour does count for that. After that, we have Facet of Dominance, so that our Void Grenades will apply a 15% weaken to any enemies that it hits. And then after that, we have Facet of Protection for the free DR that we get for simply being near enemies. And then lastly is Facet of Courage, so our light abilities, chiefly Hellion and our Song of Flame, deal more damage to dark debuffed enemies, which Arcane Needle will handle that. Exiting our subclass now, we have other weapon recommendations. Like I said in the beginning, due to having no necessary exotics or legendaries, we can use whatever you want. Double Special itself is also pretty sustainable on this build. For me though, I find myself running Mint Retrograde alongside something like Yeartide Apex or another solar weapon. And then for my heavy, it's usually always an eager-edged sword, unless I'm in a raid or dungeon where I need that damage. Now, next up is our armor, and when it comes to stats, this is where things get a little wacky. According to the most recent update, Hellion counts as grenade damage. That means you want to increase our grenade stat as much as possible. So for this build, we want to run 200 grenade as the focus, if you can manage that. Other than that, we want to have close to 100 class. Being above that doesn't really do much for us. We also want to have 100 super for the region, and then whatever you can get across weapons, health, and melee, doesn't really matter. But taking a look at what 200 grenade stat does to our Hellion, our new values are 428 from the main projectile and 29 for the shrapnel. This gives us a DPS value of 640. That gives this passive ability comparable damage to that of special weapons. So while you're slaying out with something like Mint Retrograde, your damage output is effectively doubled with this build. But now moving on from armor stats, we have armor mods. On the helmet, we can run an ammo finder and siphons that match whatever weapons you're using. On our arms, we will run 3 firepowers. This is because Hellion, of course, now counts as grenade damage and will activate this mod whenever it gets a kill. You can actually see this in game in the background footage. Then on our chest piece, we run resists and an ammo generation. On our legs, we run an insulation to get class ability back on orb pickup, run an absolution to get a bit of everything back on orb pickup, but this doubles into class, and then a scavenger for whatever special weapons you might be using. And then on our class item, we run the classic combo of special finisher for free special ammo, powerful attraction to pick up orbs whenever we use our Phoenix Dive, and proximity ward to become invincible when doing finishers. Now moving on from our armor and mods, we finally have the artifact. Within, the first mod that we really make use of is Radiant Shrapnel. This mod will cause Solar Seekers to spawn whenever we deal damage while radiant, or when dealing damage against a scorched enemy. And kind of coming off of that, we have Fever and Chill, mainly so our solar weapons make us radiant. But then a fantastic ability is Cauterized Darkness. This perk will cause dark debuffed enemies to receive even more solar damage as long as they're not bosses. So it's perfect for anti-champion reasons. And then the last perk is Shield Crush. This perk is incredibly popular for how it affects our grenades and melees, but what we're focusing on today is the grenade side of things, but not for our grenade ability. Again, Hellion now counts as grenade damage, and if we look at this in game, while radiant, Hellion does even more damage. Our new values are 535 for the main projectile and 36 for each of the shrapnel, with our max DPS now being closer to 700. That is really good for something that you don't even need to think about. But now, to finish this video, we have the gameplay loop. To begin, we just want a Phoenix Dive. This will spawn our Hellion, and it should immediately target some nearby enemies. With Yunoya's damage boost, it should easily score a kill and activate Devour. If it doesn't, then you can throw out some Arcane Needles or Vortex Grenade to ensure that it does. But once this first sequence of events is done, you can do whatever you want. Getting kills with weapons or abilities will be regenerating your health and keeping Devour active, which, thanks to our subclass, will fast track us to our next Phoenix dive, thus another Hellion. The cooldown is so quick that you should never not have a buffed Hellion active. And realistically, there shouldn't be any thinking with this build. Everything that is happening is 100% passive. All you need to focus on is reducing enemies' health to 0 and whatever objective you might be doing. If you are up against some particularly healthy enemies, your grenades do weaken them, allowing you to deal more damage to them, and this is the same when you're Transcendent, so feel free to pop that when you get it. And of course, eventually you'll come up against a boss or find yourself in a tricky situation, and this is where you should pop your Song of Flame. And I actually think that's the entire gameplay loop. Super simple today. Remember that everything I discussed in this build applies to regular solar as well. If you're ever forced on that subclass for a raid or something, do remember that. Also, do remember that there are dim links down below. That way you can grab these builds really easily. And if you enjoy this video, again, a subscription would be greatly appreciated. But now for my usual outro. If you want to support me, support the channel, a like, a comment, a subscription goes a very long way. If you want to support me and support the channel, but you can't think of a comment down below, hell. With that, as usual, I hope you are having a great day and I hope to see you around.